When Brielle and Brooklyn Carter walked through the gates of Edison Ridge Academy, an elite private school for the wealthy and white, they weren't welcomed. They were measured, mocked, and nearly broken. But what no one knew was, these charity cases had been trained their whole lives for this very moment. And when the line was finally crossed, they didn't just defend themselves. They changed everything. The moment Brielle and Brooklyn Carter crossed the manicured lawn, they could feel it in the air, that tight, invisible line drawn around everything. The brick buildings stood like monuments to old money and legacy, their windows polished until they glared like watchful eyes. The school wasn't built to welcome girls like them. It was built to remind them where they didn't belong. They walked in perfect step, uniforms crisp, postures sharp. They had learned early that when the world watched you like a threat, you carried yourself like steel. Their shoes tapped against stone, echoing louder than anyone else's, even though no one said a word, but they felt it. Every glance, every sneer, every whisper just loud enough to hurt, but soft enough to deny. They were used to being the only ones in a room, the only black girls in a sea of pale privilege. But Edison Ridge was different. Here, the privilege wasn't just silent, it was aggressive. It strutted, it mocked. It wore custom shoes and $1,000 smiles passed down from fathers who owned real estate empires and mothers who ran charity galas for causes they... On the first day, the twins were introduced at assembly like exhibits. "These are our new diversity scholars," the principal announced, not even using their last name. Just a label, like they were a project, not people. From the front row, Ryan Lancaster smirked. He leaned over to his friends, Zach Myers and Brent Dawson, and whispered just loud enough, "Charity cases, what's next? Bringing in orphans from the zoo?" Laughter, quick, sharp, the kind that cuts even when you pretend not to hear it. Brielle caught it, of course she did. But she didn't blink. Her father had trained her better than that. Control is power, he always said. She kept walking. Brooklyn, too. Her jaw tightened, but her eyes stayed forward. They didn't need to speak. One glance was enough. They'd been through this before. New school, new city, new storm. They always walked through it together. Marcus Carter had made sure of that. Their father wasn't a man of many words. He believed in showing, not telling. And he showed them how to stand, how to see threats before they showed themselves, how to strike if they had to, but only when it mattered. From the moment they were strong enough to balance on one foot, he had taught them how to throw a clean punch and take a hard fall without losing breath. More importantly, he taught them how to stay calm when the world wanted them to explode. He didn't raise fighters. He raised forces of nature. So when Brielle and Brooklyn sat down in their first period history class and no one moved to sit beside them, they didn't flinch. When the teacher mispronounced their names and kept going without correction, they wrote notes without hesitation. When the girl in front of them passed a text that read, "They smell like cocoa butter," they didn't react. They'd been taught the game, and they weren't about to lose it just to prove a point. But even they didn't expect the teachers to be this silent, this complicit. Some looked through them. Some acted overly polite in a way that felt like mockery wrapped in formality. And some, like Mr. Daniels, their English teacher, watched as Brent knocked Brooklyn's binder off her desk and simply said, "Watch where you're sitting." Still, the twins didn't bite. Not yet. They moved like shadows, sharp, quiet, steady. But every day the pressure grew, like something waiting to break. On the fourth day, Brooklyn opened her locker to find a banana taped inside. On it, written in thick black marker, "For your kind." No one was around when she saw it. No one claimed it. But someone had known her locker number. Someone had planned it. She peeled the banana, took a bite, and threw it away without a word. But that night at home, when Marcus saw the tiredness in their eyes, not physical, but spiritual, he didn't ask what happened. He didn't press. He simply stood behind them as they washed their dishes and said, "They don't know who they're dealing with." Brooklyn looked up. Yet. It started with hallway bumps. Subtle, calculated, the kind of physicality that walks the line between accident and threat. Brent accidentally slammed into Brielle near the water fountain. Zach brushed hard past Brooklyn on the stairs, making her stumble against the rail, always followed by a smug grin, always loud enough for others to see and stay quiet. The worst part wasn't the impact, it was the silence afterward. Students looked away, teachers adjusted their glasses or kept their eyes on papers, as if ignoring it made it disappear, as if being a bystander wasn't the same as being part of it. But Brielle and Brooklyn stayed steady. They picked up their books, they adjusted their jackets, they moved forward without flinching. They were keeping score, and the scoreboard was filling fast. One afternoon, Brielle passed a group of girls in the library. One of them, Juliana, fake whispered just loud enough, "You think if we donate enough lotion, their skin will stop shining like that?" Laughter. Not loud, just cruel. Brooklyn heard it from across the room. Her spine stiffened, but she didn't turn. Her father's voice echoed in her head. "They want your reaction. Don't give them what they came for." But the worst was yet to come. A week later, the twins walked into homeroom and froze. Their lockers had been destroyed. Red paint dripping down the metal. Letters in all caps, "Animals." Someone had drawn twisted caricatures of their faces, exaggerated lips, wide noses, wild hair. There were bananas duct taped to the vents, dozens of them. The hallway filled with laughter, phones raised, pictures snapped. Juliana stood nearby, pretending to look shocked, but not surprised. Ryan, Brent, and Zach leaned against a locker, watching the scene like it was a show written just for them. No one moved to stop it. Not a teacher, not a student. Just the janitor, who handed them paper towels without meeting their eyes. Brooklyn's fingers trembled as she scrubbed at the paint. Brielle didn't speak. She moved with slow, deliberate care, wiping her name clean from something meant to shame her. That night at dinner, Marcus noticed the silence. He set down his fork. "Tell me," he said. Not a command, a space, a permission. Brooklyn looked up. "They're not just pushing anymore," she said. "They're trying to erase us," Brielle added. "And no one's stopping them." Marcus nodded slowly, no surprise on his face, only quiet understanding. "You remember what I told you," he said. "Control is power, but when they cross the line, you meet them on the other side. Not with rage, with precision." The next day, the whispers started early. Someone had posted the locker photo to a private group chat, students only. It spread fast. Not because people cared, but because cruelty sells. Some laughed, some stayed quiet. But no one said a word to the twins. Until Ryan did. As they crossed the courtyard, he stepped into their path. "You girls ever think maybe you're the problem?" he asked, hands in his pockets, fake casual. "I mean, everywhere you go, trouble follows. Kinda says something." Brent snickered. Zach tossed a banana at their feet. Brooklyn looked at it, then back at them, and said nothing. They kept walking. But the storm was building. That night, Brooklyn sat at the edge of her bed, holding one of the crumpled papers she'd pulled from her locker. One of the slurs scribbled in black ink. She stared at it for a long moment before folding it in half. Then in half again. Then in half again. Then she burned it. The next morning they arrived early. Earlier than usual, before the halls filled. They stood together in front of their lockers. Freshly cleaned, repainted overnight by order of the administration. A weak attempt to fix the surface. But the surface was never the problem. Behind them, they heard it. That familiar voice. "Well, if it isn't our resident National Geographic exhibit," Ryan said. He was grinning, too confident, too sure of himself. Zach added, "Still here? I thought we made it clear. This school's not for animals." Brooklyn's hand flexed at her side. But still, no reaction. Ryan leaned in closer, his voice dropping. "You know what the best part is?" he said. "No one's gonna help you, because no one thinks you belong here." That's when Brielle turned, just her head, just enough, and looked at him. Calm, cold, not a word, just a look that said, "I've counted every step you've taken. I know exactly what comes next." Ryan blinked, just for a second. But it was there. A crack. He felt it. That night, Marcus called both girls into the garage. The lights were low. The punching bags hung still. He stood by the wall, arms crossed. "Tomorrow," he said, "if they push first. We end it. Brooklyn finished. Brielle nodded, and Marcus said nothing else, because there was nothing left to say. The morning air was thick with anticipation. Something felt different. Students lingered in the courtyard longer than usual, pretending to scroll their phones, but glancing up every few seconds toward the front gates. Everyone had heard the rumors. Something was coming. Everyone just didn't know what. Brielle and Brooklyn walked in side by side, same as always, heads high, faces unreadable, but their pace was deliberate, steady, controlled. They had been silent long enough. Ryan Lancaster stood near the fountain, flanked by Brent and Zach, his usual smirk plastered across his face like armor. The second he spotted them, he raised his voice. Well, 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 look who's still showing up like they belong. A few students nearby chuckled, not because the line was funny, but because they were waiting for what came next. Ryan stepped forward. I guess some people don't know when they're not wanted. Brielle didn't flinch. Brooklyn didn't blink. But they didn't walk away, either. Zach chimed in. Yo, maybe we need to draw them a map back to the zoo. Another wave of laughter, more nervous this time. Phones were already out. Someone whispered, It's happening. Ryan moved closer, close enough for the tension to feel electric. You know what your problem is? He said, his voice low but carrying. You keep thinking if you walk straight and act quiet, we'll accept you. But you'll never be one of us. You're just background noise. Brooklyn stepped forward first. Just a single step. Her voice was calm, even. You talk too much. Ryan blinked. His grin faltered. Excuse me? Brielle answered, voice steady as stone. You've been running your mouth for weeks. We let you, but you stepped too far. You crossed the line. So today, we show you what happens next. The courtyard fell completely still. Ryan scoffed. What, you're gonna give us a lecture? He shoved Brielle in the shoulder, hard. You don't get to speak here. She stumbled a step back but caught herself easily. The reaction wasn't fear, it was calculation. Brooklyn's books hit the pavement a second later, knocked from her arms by Brent, who grinned as the pages scattered. Oops, he said. Guess you're not used to handling real material. Zach stepped in with a shoulder check that sent Brooklyn back a step. You gonna cry now? Gonna run to daddy? That was it. That was the trigger. Brielle's voice came quiet but sharp. We're done running. And then everything moved at once. She stepped forward, planted her heel, and drove the palm of her hand into Ryan's chest with surgical precision. He stumbled back, gasping for air as he crashed into the stone bench behind him. Brooklyn swept Brent's legs out from under him with a clean, low kick that sent him sprawling to the ground, knocking the wind out of him. Zach lunged, fists up, but Brooklyn sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and flipped him onto his back so fast the phones barely caught it. Gasps, shouts, the circle around them widened. Students stepped back, unsure whether to be horrified or amazed. Some just stood frozen, phones pointed, recording every second. Ryan scrambled to his feet, charging toward Brielle with a wild swing. She ducked easily, stepped inside, and landed a tight hook to his ribs that doubled him over. Brent tried to rise, but Brooklyn was there, grabbing his collar, dragging him forward just enough to drop him again with a precise elbow to the shoulder that left him wincing in pain. Zach, now desperate, picked up a broken stick from the mulch bed nearby and swung at Brooklyn. She caught his wrist mid-air, twisted, disarmed him in one clean motion and sent him tumbling sideways. She didn't speak, she didn't gloat. Every movement was methodical, intentional, drilled into her bones by years of training. Ryan, still gasping, threw a final clumsy punch at Brielle. She caught his wrist, stepped in, and slammed her knee into his gut with enough force to knock the breath clean from his lungs. He crumpled at her feet. Silence. No one moved. No one laughed. No one dared speak. The twins stood in the center of the courtyard, not triumphant, not angry, just composed, steady, powerful. Brielle looked around at the stunned crowd. Her voice was calm, clear. You all saw it. We didn't start this, but we finished it. Brooklyn added, This ends here, now. No more whispers, no more jokes, no more games. Ryan groaned from the ground, still trying to catch his breath. Brent clutched his ribs. Zach curled on his side, humiliated. Teachers burst through the doors moments later, too late to stop it, too late to change what had just happened. Their faces frozen somewhere between panic and disbelief. One of them called for the assistant principal. Another pulled out a radio. But no one touched the girls. Because everyone knew they had been pushed, and they had answered. The courtyard was still ringing with silence when the assistant principal finally arrived. Mr. Carter, eyes wide, mouth tight, pushed through the stunned circle of students. He scanned the scene, 3 boys on the ground, bruised and breathless, 2 girls standing tall, composed, not even winded. "What is going on here?" he barked, though the answer hung thick in the air. Ryan, still coughing, found his voice first. "They attacked us," he wheezed. "We didn't even touch them. They just snapped, went wild." His lie wasn't confident. It was panicked. Desperate. A script written too late. Some students nodded hesitantly. Others stayed silent. But a few looked at each other and didn't look away. That silence broke when Mia Thompson, a junior who had watched the whole thing, stepped forward. "That's not what happened," she said. "They didn't start it." Ryan shoved Brielle first. Brent knocked Brooklyn's books down. Zach swung with a stick. The crowd shifted, like a weight being passed from shoulder to shoulder. A few others spoke up too, more cautious, but clear. "Yeah, I saw it." They were defending themselves. Phones were still recording. Videos were already on the school's private forums. One clip, just 8 seconds long, showed Ryan shoving Brielle. Another caught Brooklyn disarming Zach in mid-swing. The narrative was slipping. Fast. Still, the school moved quickly. Too quickly. By lunchtime, both Brielle and Brooklyn had been called to the front office and handed suspension slips. 3 days. Pending investigation. No apology. No questions. Just a